thee, and return unto my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether they yet be alive. And Jethro said to Moses, Go in peace. And the Lord said unto Moses in Midian, Go, return into Egypt, for all the men are dead which sought thy life. And Moses took his wife and his sons, and set them upon an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. Before you sit down, just repeat today's message with me and say, trust God with your stick. Go and point to somebody before you sit down and tell them, I know you got a stick. Now trust God with your stick. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. Now, the context of today's lesson, it revolves around the call of Moses to be the deliverer of the nation of Israel that had been held captive as slaves in a land called Egypt. The interesting thing to note here is that Moses is not a young man. In this particular text, Moses is 80 years old. That goes for some of you all who feel like because you've gotten on in age that you can't do anything for the Lord. Just touch somebody and tell them you ain't too old yet. He's a fugitive from Egypt. You remember when he was in Egypt and he saw an Egyptian brutalizing a Hebrew. And Moses was moved with compassion for his fellow Israelite. And he killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand, and he fled Egypt. He was guilty of second-degree murder and was on the lam. Am I in the right house? And some of us ought to be moved with compassion when we see the plight of some of our brothers and sisters. And so now Moses lives with his father-in-law Jethro, and he keeps Jethro's sheep. The interesting thing is that Moses was born and raised in Egypt, raised in the ways of Pharaoh, went to the best schools and was learned, but yet he had no problem reducing himself and humbling himself to the point where he just kept his father-in-law's sheep. And how many understand that sometimes you've got to forget about your pedigree? Yeah, forget about what a big shot you are and how educated you are, and stop looking at some tasks as being beneath you. I wish I had somebody here. One of the biggest problems I see in the church is the danger of giving folk paper. What are you talking about, Pastor? Every now and then you give somebody a minister's license or a missionary's license, or you give them a piece of paper or an appointment to something, and all of a sudden they feel like certain tasks are beneath them. You know, before I got licensed, I used to clean the kitchen. Y'all ain't gonna help me now. Before I became a missionary, I used to pass out the fans. Help me, somebody. But the psalmist said, I'll be satisfied with just being a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. And so Moses is here on the backside of the desert keeping sheep, and he does not appear to be the likely choice for this particular ministry that God has in mind. There's nothing on his resume that says that he is a public spokesperson. There's nothing that says he has the organizational skills or capacity to lead anywhere between 1 and 3 million people out of bondage into freedom. And when the call of God comes, Moses gives every excuse he can think of to get out of what the Lord has for him to do. Moses is there when he sees the burning bush and goes up to see what's going on. And here's the voice of the Lord call out, telling Moses, take your shoes off. The ground you're standing on is holy ground, and you've got to make sure that you come before the Lord in the right way. And when Moses got before the Lord, he said he did not feel worthy. He said, Lord, not only do I not feel worthy of this task, Lord, I don't even know your name. And what am I going to tell the people when I go before you when they ask me what your name is? The Lord said, just tell them that I am. That I am. You ought to just touch somebody, testify to him and say, he is what he is. And whatever you need him to be, that's what he is. He's food on your table. He's water in your cup. He's a doctor in your sick room. He's a lawyer in your courtroom. He is what he is. He says, the people won't believe me. I'm not good with words. Send somebody else. And in the middle of this account, God asked Moses a question. And that question is found right here in verse number 2. And it is that question that I want to investigate today. That question and the answer to it has importance for our lives right now. And the question is rather simple. The Lord says, what is it that you got in your hand? And Moses gave a simple answer. He said, Lord, it's a rod. All he had in his hand that day was a simple shepherd's staff. All he had in his hand was a dead, dry stick. Everybody say a stick, a stick. That's all it was to Moses. The only thing I got in my hand, Lord, is this stick. But you have to understand that in the eyes of God, it was more than just a stick. And so the question comes to you today. What do you have in your hand? Ask your neighbor, what you got? What you got? What you got in your hand? As we attempt to improve the conditions of our complicated lives, what do you have in your hand? As we attempt to fix the failures of the wrong decisions that we have made in the past, what do you have in your hand? As we deal with the insecurity of our financial condition, what do you have in your hand? As we attempt to instill the right stuff within our children and influence the future of a new generation, what do we have in our hands? In other words, my sisters and brothers, what is available to you? What is at your disposal? What is in your possession? What is underneath your influence? What do you have in your hand? Moses says, I got a rod. Lord, all I got is this stick. And the stick was nothing special of itself. It was just a rod. It was just a shepherd's staff, something that Moses used as he kept his father-in-law's sheep, and maybe it would ward away predators, and it would help Moses in his job of keeping the sheep. But certainly a stick could not help him before Pharaoh. A stick could not help him to deliver God's people out of bondage. The stick was nothing special. It was just a rod. It wasn't even a fancy stick. It wasn't even an expensive stick. He didn't even get it from Walmart. He just found it somewhere out there in the desert. Help me, somebody. It wasn't made of Arcadia wood, or it wasn't made of mahogany. Help me here. It wasn't made of any special kind of wood. It was just a stick. Everybody say a stick. A stick. But what was significant about this stick was this. It was what Moses had. I wish I had a witness in here. I said what was significant is it was what he had. Look at somebody and say, what you got? What you got? What is it that you have? Now I want you to take a special note of this, because this is vitally important. Is the fact that God asked Moses what he had. He did not ask Moses what he did not have.
That's right.
I'm going to help some church folk in here. He did not concentrate on what he lacked.
That's right.
And many times when we go about our way and we begin to do the things of the Lord, we focus on what we do not have. Am I in the right house? We focus on what we lack. He did not face the challenge of accomplishing the difficult task based on what he did not have. And what we do is often when God gives the leader a vision, or when God gives us a vision for our life, instead of taking God's vision and looking at what we have that is available to help us accomplish the vision that God has given us, we make a long list of what we don't have. Am I in the right house? We don't have enough money. Lord, I don't have a good enough education. I don't have the type of social standing or influence that I need to have to accomplish this particular task. Lord, I would do that, but I don't even have a good job. Help me, somebody. I don't have a nice car. I don't have the experience. Come on here. I don't have, and so oftentimes, as opposed to even trying to accomplish what God has placed before us, we resign ourselves to defeat based upon what we don't have. But God never directs our attention to what we don't have. Notice, if you will, every time you look in a biblical text, you find that God always points to what somebody does have as opposed to what they lack. And what you have might seem small to you. But I just want to give you a news flash that God gave you everything you needed to accomplish the job that he gave to you. Oh, you ought to tell your neighbor, you already have what you need. God is smart enough to know that if he gives you a job, he has to give you the capacity and the wherewithal to complete the job that he gave you. So if God gave you the task, baby, he gave you the stuff that you need to accomplish the task. God wouldn't tell you to dig a ditch and not give you a shovel. And if he didn't give you a shovel, he's going to give you something equivalent to the shovel. Y'all ain't going to help me preach in here today. Oh, God gave you what you need, even though it seems small, it seems weak, it seems to be insignificant. God did this on purpose because God has designed it so that what we have has to be connected to him in order for it to work. Y'all gonna get this in a minute. What are you saying, Pastor Swan? What I'm trying to tell you is that what you have seems insignificant to you because based upon it and your might, you cannot complete the task that God has for you. And so in order for you to complete the task, you have to connect what you have to God, and then when God gets hold of what you have, then you're able to complete the task. And so may I suggest to you that what makes the difference in what we have is not the significance of what we have, but the power of God that's in what we have. It's not in your ability. It's not in my ability. It's not in your knowledge. It's not in your talent. It's not in the size of my gift or the beauty of my gift that might matter. The only thing that matters is, watch this, how much of God